Good day and welcome to Around Africa on Afrivox TV. I am Teresa Adeyemi. Here are the top stories making headlines across Africa today. Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema wins a second presidential term as questions are raised over the conduct of the election. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo becomes the deadliest in the country's history, with more than 2,300 deaths reported. At least 25 people were killed in an overnight attack in Nigeria's Plateau State as authorities fear possible reprisals. Dangote Refinery secures $1 billion in underwriting support ahead of a planned Nigeria IPO. And Ghana raises concerns with Russia over the recruitment of its citizens into the war in Ukraine. Those are the headlines, now the details. Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has won a second term in office according to results announced by the country's Electoral Commission. Hichilema secured about 61% of the vote, defeating his main challenger, Brian Mudumbele, who received approximately 38%. The result gives Hichilema another 5 years to pursue his economic reform program, including efforts to attract investment, manage the country's debt, and expand its copper industry. But the election has not been without controversy. There were reports of disruption during the counting process, while opposition figures raised concerns over the political environment and the treatment of opposition activists. The Electoral Commission also temporarily suspended counting in some areas following incidents involving election officials. Hichilema first came to power in 2021 after defeating former President Edgar Lungu. His second term challenge will be to turn economic stabilization into improved living standard for ordinary Zambians, particularly through jobs, electricity supply, and stronger household incomes. Hichilema's re-election therefore gives Zambia political continuity but also places greater pressure on the president to deliver. From Zambia, we move to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a major health emergency is escalating. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has now become the deadliest Ebola outbreak in the country's history. Government figures put the number of deaths at approximately 2,325 for almost 4,945 reported cases. The current outbreak has now surpassed the previous record set during the 2018 to 2020 Ebola outbreak. The World Health Organization says the situation remains extremely serious, but the outbreak can still potentially be brought under control within about 3 months if sufficient resources are provided. One of the biggest concerns is transmission. WHO says approximately 70 to 80% of new cases have no known transmission link, making it much difficult for health officials to trace infections and identify people who may not have been exposed. The outbreak has also spread to 6 provinces, increases the pressure on already stretched health facilities. WHO is seeking about $150 million for the response. Health officials are now racing to expand surveillance, treatment capacity, and contact tracing before the virus spreads further. The next few weeks could be critical in determining whether the outbreak can be brought under control. From a health emergency in Central Africa to a deadly security incident in Nigeria. At least 25 people have been killed in an overnight attack in Mango local government area of Nigeria's Plateau State. The attack occurred between the late hours of Monday, August 17 and the early hours of Tuesday, August 18. Communities affected include Bimpa, Wag and Murish. The Plateau State House of Assembly says 25 people were killed in Bimpa alone, with another death reported in the Jiwag and Murish area. The Assembly also says 38 houses were burnt, while farmlands, barns, and store food were destroyed. The casualty figure remains subject to further confirmation as authorities continue assessing the affected communities. Security agencies are being urged to strengthen intelligence gathering and respond more quickly to threats against vulnerable communities. There are also concerns that the latest killing could trigger reprisal attacks. Afrivox TV is not attributing the attack to any particular group at this stage because the perpetrators have not been officially established. The immediate priority now is to protect residents, prevent further violence, and establish who was responsible. The incident also raises concerns about food security as many affected residents depend on farming for their livelihoods. Still in Nigeria, our next story takes us from security to the capital market and one of the country's biggest industrial projects. Nigeria's Dangote Petroleum Refinery has secured a $1 billion underwriting program ahead of its planned initial public offering. The program consists of a $600 million completed and funded private placement alongside a further $400 million underwriting commitment linked to the planned IPO. But there is an important distinction. The refinery has not raised $1 billion from a public IPO. The $600 million is from a completed private placement, while the $400 million represent underwriting support for the planned public offering. Dangote Refinery has also applied to Nigeria Securities and Exchange Commission for a potential IPO of up to $5 billion. However, the final size of the IPO has not yet been determined. The proposed listing could become one of Africa's biggest public offerings and would potentially give Nigerian investors an opportunity to own shares in one of the continent's most important industrial assets. The refinery majority owned by businessman Aliko Dangote has a processing capacity of about 700,000 barrels per day. The company is also planning further expansion. Investors will now be watching the regulatory process, valuation, and eventual pricing of the shares. If successfully completed, the IPO could become a landmark event for Nigerians' capital markets. And finally, today we turn to Ghana, where a diplomatic dispute over the recruitment of African citizens into the Russia-Ukraine war is gaining attention. Ghana questions Russia over citizens' recruitment. Ghana has raised concerns with Russia over the recruitment of Ghanaian citizens into Russia's military for the war in Ukraine. Ghana's Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa raised the issue during talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Ablakwa says 62 Ghanaians have been killed while another 15 remain missing. Ghana wants what is described as illegal recruitment channels to be stopped. Russia, however, has offered a different explanation. Lavrov says some Ghanaian citizens had voluntarily signed contracts with Russia's defense ministry, citing financial and other motivations. So it is important to note that Russia has not been confirmed to have completely stopped recruiting Ghanaians. Ghana said both sides will continue working together on the issue. The dispute comes amid growing concern over the recruitment of African nationals into Russia's war effort. Ukraine has claimed that thousands of Africans from dozens of countries have been recruited into Russian forces, although those figures are Ukrainian government claims and have not been independently verified by Afrivox TV. For Ghana, the immediate concern is the protection of its citizens and establishing the fate of those reported missing. The issue is also becoming a wider diplomatic challenge for African government maintaining relations with Moscow. And that's our Around Africa report for today, from Zambia's presidential election to the escalating Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo, from deadly violence in Nigeria's Plateau State to the proposed Dangote Refinery IPO and Ghana's diplomatic engagement with Russia over its citizens involved in the war in Ukraine. These are developments shaping Africa today. I am Teresa Adeyemi. Thank you for watching Around Africa on Afrivox TV. Stay informed, stay connected, stay with Afrivox TV.